Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on a 2020 plan for safer facilities. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ann Cosgrove, the editor-in-chief of Facility Executive Magazine, and this webinar today is presented by ABM, a leading provider of facility solutions. So before we get started, I would just like to cover a few housekeeping items. Please note the control panel on your screen. This is where you can submit questions in the question box in that panel. There will be a Q&A at the end, and you can send your questions in at any time, and they'll be addressed at the end by our panelists. Also, please note the orange arrow on the left side of your control panel. Clicking on that arrow will either expand or collapse the panel, so you want to be sure it's expanded to access the question box. Also, if at any time you experience a technical difficulty, please send a message to us in that section, and someone on our team will answer you privately. On that note of technical difficulties, we do have a few speakers in Texas today, and if any of you on the line as well in the audience are in Texas or other area affected by the weather this week, I wanted to mention that if there are any technical problems, just be aware that we will have a recording of the webinar, and we'll get that to you all via email. Of course, we hope that doesn't happen today, and we're looking forward to a great discussion. Lastly, if you're interested in continuing education credits, you'll receive a certificate of attendance in an email from Facility Executive, and you can report that to your association. So I just want to give a quick overview of ABM for those of you who may not be familiar, or just to give a refresher, and then we'll hand it over. So ABM's a leading provider of facility solutions. They operate with more than 100,000 employees in more than 350 offices throughout the U.S. and various international locations. The company's capabilities for properties include janitorial, electrical and lighting, energy solutions, facilities engineering, HVAC and mechanical, landscape and turf, mission-critical solutions, and parking. And these are provided through standalone or integrated solutions. So today we'll be hearing from the expert panel you see here from ABM, and we're looking forward to a great discussion and, of course, your questions and a lot of learning. So now I'm going to hand it over to Tom Gallo. He'll be heading up the panel, moderating that. Tom is Senior Vice President and Head of Strategy and Innovation for ABM, and he's led the development of the company's latest comprehensive programs around virus protection. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Tom. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Ann. Thanks a lot. We really appreciate the partnership with Facility Executive Magazine, and I'm thrilled to be leading this discussion today. I'm joined by an all-star cast of ABMers who will offer unique perspectives to help ensure you're prepared as we move forward through the winter and into the spring of 21 and plan for safer facilities. Andrea Burns is our Director of Enterprise Solutions and interacts with our largest clients every day as they battle with the many decisions to keep their facility occupants safe. She will walk us through how to make sense of all the information and solutions that are out there right now so you can make the most informed and practical decisions for your facilities. She'll also provide some guidance on what you should look for in a partner so you know that they have the right experience to help you assess risk and put a successful plan in place. Greg Shihai is our Senior Vice President of Talent, Culture, and Inclusion, and will provide an overview of how to compete for talent in a very challenging environment. Greg will describe how we're leveraging the learnings from an extremely tight pre-COVID labor market and applying them to the current situation where millions are out of work, yet COVID has different obstacles to bringing on the necessary resources required to perform. Chris Morawski is our Chief Procurement Officer, and we'll talk through the challenges in the supply chain and what the outlook is as the economy starts to open up even more and occupancy levels begin to rise. And lastly, Stephanie Finlay is our VP of Learning and Development, and we'll touch on requirements to build a best-in-class training program, which is so incredibly important when consistency and service delivery is directly attributable to the health of facility occupants. So before we get into the panel discussion, let's pose our first of 3 live poll questions. So you should see on your screen question number 1 here, and feel free to engage. When do you anticipate the facility you manage or work out of will be back to 50% plus of pre-pandemic levels? The options are by March, between April and June, between July and October, between October and December, or not in 2021. We'll give it about 30 seconds to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to submit an answer. And then we'll talk about the poll results, and then we'll also balance that with the results of a survey that we did in January with all 30,000 Facility Executive Magazine subscribers. So it'll be interesting to see how this all racks up. So the results here are in. We're seeing July through September being the most frequently answered answer, and that's very interesting because we did this in January. About half of respondents anticipated occupancy levels exceeding 50% by the end of June. But this is very consistent with, I think, has been more widely reported over even just the last few weeks. If you think how quickly this is changing, where July was the new January, and now it seems like maybe September is the new July. So interesting, but definitely concurring what we're all seeing out there. So let's discuss the current state of the pandemic before revealing some more data on the January survey. It's been about a year since COVID-19 touched down in the United States, and the latest threat is a series of new variants that are more contagious at a minimum. This is happening at the same time that vaccines are being distributed to inoculate enough of the population to reach herd immunity and pull us out of the pandemic. Besides the logistical challenges associated with getting people to take multiple shots, there's a significant percentage of the population, up to 30% has been recently reported, who will not get vaccinated. All of this leads to the conclusion that COVID-19 might be with us forever. And the protocols we're putting in place today will become permanent as we eventually move beyond the pandemic. Other results from our January survey show how the current state of the pandemic is impacting facilities managers' decisions. We're now getting some real insight into the planning that is taking place behind the scenes when it comes to vaccines and disinfection protocols. 43% of facilities are still in the process of establishing their vaccination protocols. And given the challenges around logistics and distribution, this is no surprise. Interestingly enough, about 14% have already indicated that they will require proof of vaccination to enter facilities, while 43% have indicated they will not. Still a lot to unfold over the next weeks and months for sure. When it comes to disinfection, we saw that over 90% of survey respondents are planning to either maintain or increase their enhanced cleaning protocols once occupancy rates start to climb, but almost half are still seeking additional solutions. And we found that both electrostatic spraying and HVAC improvements are still underutilized and remain effective methods in fighting emerging pathogens. Lastly, you can see here, according to a recent statement from Dr. Fauci, we could be approaching some form of normality by late summer. Let's hope that's true. Regardless of all the noise from the vaccine distribution plans that are coming from both the federal and the state level, the survey results are telling us that almost 3/4 of the facilities managers out there do not believe this will impact timing to fully reopen facilities at this point. We're also seeing a wide variation of expectations in terms of the expected occupancy when facilities get that initial influx of people coming in the door. So while more than 1/3 really never closed, it's a pretty even distribution between those expecting 75% of their occupants back, between 50 and 75% back, between 25 and 50% back, and less than 25% back. I think this really just reflects the diversity of industries and facility types represented in the 30,000 Facility Executive Magazine subscribers. So before we engage our panel, let's open it up to our second of 3 poll questions, and then I'll hand it over to Andrea. So, question number 2, are you working with outside partners to advise what changes to your FM protocols are needed to make your occupants feel safe? And you can read the answers. Got a little overzealous the first time around and read them myself. So we'll give it about 30 seconds. We'll let everyone get through this. All right, so the most frequently answered is yes, we are working with our existing advisors and vendors. A strong second is our internal team advises on all changes. That represents almost 90% of all answers. Very consistent again with our survey in January, so good to see. And And so I'm going to now hand it over to Andrea to engage the panel. Andrea, as I said, is our Director of Enterprise Solutions. She'll be leading a discussion and providing insight into how to partner with these external consultants and vendors. And for those of you that already are, she'll give you a good idea of what questions to ask and how to get the most value out of those relationships. Andrea?
Perfect. Thank you, Tom. So a word that we all became very familiar with in 2020 was fluid. It's a word that we had used to describe, most situations and plans throughout the year. And I think that the root cause for that fluidity was truly ambiguity and the continued adjustments to recommendations that we were receiving from world health leaders as we learned more about the virus and how to combat it. And as we know, we have made so much progress in 2020 and into 21 with understanding this virus, but we do still see that recommendations and plans are changing. They're continuing to evolve. And that's especially with the introduction, as Tom had mentioned, of the vaccine and the continued rollout of the vaccine. So some of the questions that I, hear lingering are, how do we know what's safe? And should we require vaccines? Again, something that Tom had just mentioned. How do we evaluate indoor air quality? And one of the bigger ones is, when should we re-enter? I know a lot of us have plans on when we would like to, but when should we re-enter? So because of this continued confusion, a lot of companies and managers, as we just saw, are leaning on third-party advisors to help either create or reevaluate the return strategy. And I would say bottom line here is that it is really challenging to make sense of it all, which is why it is so critical and so important to involve experts in the process. So if you don't mind, let me just define what I mean when I say expert. So when I say expert, I mean individuals who are educated and certified both in infectious disease and industrial hygiene. So experts in infectious disease are focused on the science of prevention and control of infectious disease, while industrial hygienists are focused on facility and workplace hazards. These are two very distinct but absolutely critical roles in forming a response to keeping facilities operational and to keeping them safe. So as we've continued to learn more about this virus, we've all begun to understand that, social distancing and masking, cleaning and disinfection, PPE use, addressing air quality are all keys in combating it. But now take it a step further, these industrial hygienists and infectious disease professionals, they on a daily basis are tirelessly researching, how is this happening? And they're able to take that research and help us turn it into practice. They're also responsible for vetting new and existing technologies and innovations related both to surface disinfection and to indoor air quality, and support the development of some of the training and certification programs that all involved in facilities operations have access to. So my assumption is that each of us are here today. I see quite a few people on the line, and each of us are here because we take our responsibilities in facilities management and operations very seriously, and that we're all committed to keeping people, whether that's our colleagues, our neighbors, our students, our occupants, our families, safe. And it's imperative that we rely on the best to pull this off successfully. So what I would challenge this group here today to ask yourself is, whether you have the right experts in place today, right? Are they certified? Are they educated? And based on what I had just described, do you feel like those current experts are truly enough? So another key consideration when you're looking at evaluating that advisor or that consultant is the specialized nature of their knowledge. So as we've learned, pandemic response is not one size fits all, right? So those of you joining us today are probably responsible for facilities management airlines or airports, schools, manufacturing facilities, data centers, call centers, multi-tenant commercial office buildings. That list goes on. But what's even more is that within each of those categories that I just mentioned, population, geography, building setup, occupant health, all may vary. That said, when you are looking to lean on a partner, make sure that you look toward a partner who can provide local consultants who are familiar with your industry specifically. Make sure that they have the ability to see your facility for themselves and perform site surveys and risk assessments. And I'm actually going to get a little bit further into risk assessments in a minute here, because it's absolutely critical in order to plan the proper response protocol for your unique facility. Something else to ask yourself is whether your partner has or can provide fully comprehensive checklists to guide discussion and planning. And some of those checklist items should include discussions around national and local regulations, indoor air quality needs, disinfection strategies, staffing plans for combating some of the hiring issues that we're seeing that Greg is going to get into, and inventory of sanitizers, of toilet paper, disinfectants, gloves. And I know it's not too distant a memory for most of us when we were scrambling for sanitizers and toilet paper, whether that was for commercial use or for our own residential use. That is something that could certainly represent itself if we don't start planning in advance. So make sure that those are part of that conversation with your partner. Make sure that they have a planned approach to those conversations. And then I would say, be sure to pressure test your partner's employee training program. This is a new world for most of us, which does require new and different trainings and maybe even certifications. So employee training should be something that your partner can provide for all employees that are entering your facility. And they should be able to provide both verification of comprehension and completion of that training. Lastly, I would just keep in mind that these risk assessments and checklists, trainings, and certifications should be done at the outset of the pandemic, but really should be revisited continuously to evolve with those updated facts and updated risk factors that we're seeing. It cannot be a set it and forget it type situation. So ultimately, I would say bottom line or in summary here is your partner or your consultant must be able to help consult on the exact right strategy for your facility at the exact right time. So I had mentioned the importance of those facility risk assessments and the fact that they are key in really creating that strategy. So let's actually dive a little bit deeper into some of those key components of your facility risk assessment. So to be clear, there is a lot when understanding what's driving risk in your facility. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time here today to really touch on all of it, but I do want to get some of those key considerations out to all of you. And before I get there, I want to call out two of the most important things. So, if you're to forget everything that I tell you about risk assessments, do please make sure to jot these two down. They're going to be your guidance for moving forward. And one is your facility risk is going to be dictated by the severity of hazard and the likelihood of incidence. And the number two thing is, in order to understand severity and likelihood, you must implement assessments that are based on science. And I would bold, italicize, underline the word science, right? And that goes back to that importance of engaging an expert in your process. So let me walk through some of the questions that I consider during my risk assessments to help me with both likelihood and severity. And I'm going to start with likelihood. So for likelihood, I question, what industry is this facility in? What is the population on site and how densely is that population situated on site? What types of visitor protocols do you have and what does traffic look like? Have you reevaluated your HVAC and ventilation in your facility, and what were the findings? How have you benchmarked the air mixing and air changeover in facilities against what is recommended? And then based on the answers to some of those questions and more, I'm able to determine, how likely is it that incidents will occur, low to very high. And then we turn to severity. What factors drive severity? Well, the first would be the health of your occupants, right? So what is the average age of the occupants in your facility? Is there a high instance of underlying conditions for those occupants? And what about the individuals within their households? How likely is it that vaccinations have been administered? And then the second thing that we want to make sure that we're considering is toxicity of the pathogen of concern. And this is something that Tom had also talked about, but is making sure that we're understanding the risk in exposure to new strains of COVID-19. So keep in mind that some of these considerations are consistent and unchanging, while others may vary. And one of the big examples is going to be population in buildings from month to month. So part of this risk assessment should include understanding how these factors will impact risk today, but also making sure that you're understanding how those risk factors could change over time, and then build that scaled approach based on what you're seeing. So I know, like I said, that was a lot to consider, but please remember that the key to understanding risk is to measure severity and likelihood, and all measurements must be rooted in science. So everything we've covered thus far helps build the strategy, right? So now we have our plan, but let's consider, how do we make this plan a reality? And the specific items that we're going to want to consider would include staffing, supply chain, and training. And in order to do so, I want to invite our expert panelists to actually speak on those topics. And I just want to kick them off here quickly by saying, keep in mind that we are seeing challenges with staffing, and it's likely that you are as well. This pandemic is presenting new challenges for us, and it's been described as a war on talent. So Greg is going to walk us through the state of the industry and key success factors for talent strategy. We're also, as I'd mentioned, very familiar with the challenges that we'd faced in inventory outages for disinfectants and sanitizers as the pandemic took effect, and the consideration is really no different as we begin to reopen. So plans and strategies need to be in place now in order to be successful in the short term as facilities reopen, whether that is July, whether that's September, whether that's going into 2021. And Chris is going to speak on exactly how to achieve success in that arena. Lastly, we've discussed the strategies for proper indoor air quality and disinfection. Now, how do we bring those to life? By making sure that we have proper training of our employees. So Stephanie is going to speak to that training pattern with the employees. What are some of the best practices relating to training? And then not only training, but then making sure that it's understood by occupants that we do have the proper practices in place. So before I pass it to Greg, I just want to thank you all for joining us, and thank you for your diligence and your commitment to safety in facilities. I'm looking forward to the Q&A discussion, but I also want to tell you that Q&A doesn't need to stop here. I know we have a lot of information to share in a really short amount of time. So if there are any lingering questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. There are plenty of resources here and available for you. So thank you all, and Greg, take it away.
Thanks, Andrea. Hello, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Greg Shihai. I'm the SVP of Global Talent and Culture and Inclusion. I've been with ABM for about 2.5 years, and I've got about 25 years experience in the people development space. And I can honestly say that I absolutely have passion around watching organizations and people grow to be high performing. When the pandemic hit, we immediately went on pause to understand what challenges we were potentially going to be up against in the environment. And we needed to understand a lot more about unemployment, what could the record low numbers go to specifically in the cleaning space. We wanted to monitor the unemployment across the US, but we would actually do a drill down and specifically look at the audiences that were related to the functions and the services that we provide. Job demand up 75%. Speaking of cleaning, it's one thing everyone was focused on, right? And we needed to understand what was that going to be in terms of our challenges, in terms of driving the right level of people and the quality of people that we were going to need in this organization in order for us to be successful. Wages, are we competitive? What are we thinking about in terms of pay rates? Are we doing anything specifically to drive flow into our organization that would be something that those essential workers that are good in what they do would want to come and work for ABM and have ABM be a brand of being the employer of choice. Benefits and workplace culture. What kind of culture are we driving in the organization? Stephanie's going to talk about a lot about how we are extremely proud of the training that we do in the organization and how do we drive that and really explain that to people that are interested in coming to work for us and have that be a driver of how people would think about being proud of the place that they work for. And then obviously we need to pay attention very closely to what supplemental government payouts are happening by local governments in the CARES Act is specifically around are people getting paid to actually be safe and stay at home versus go to work and employ themselves in those essential jobs that are attractive, right? So we had to understand what those challenges were. So we had to really focus on, number one, doing a deep dive in these areas. And then once we did, we had to focus on three things. One of those three things is optimize our team. We had to take a look at the current recruiting team and understand what does the certification look like as it relates to that recruitment team and how do we focus on training and delivery as being the excellent that it is today, and how do we raise that bar? Applicant flow. We needed to really take a look at where geographically we were having challenges based on what we saw in 2019 versus 2020. We had to come up with targeted marketing campaigns that were going to very much focus on how do we drive that applicant flow into the right areas so that we can get our hires that we needed for specific clients. And then managing our data on decisioning. Scorecards for each client, scorecards for each industry group, and make decisions that are based upon data that help us drive the success of our current clients and potential clients that we can be really proud of, that we can end up knowing that we're going to exceed those expectations, not only in the number of people that we're hiring, but also the quality of services that we can provide. So that's just a quick overview of the areas and the things that we did. And we'll look forward to any questions that you may have. But I want to save some time for Chris and Steph, so I'll turn it back over to you, Andrea.
Perfect. Thanks, Greg. So I think it's really interesting that, some of what we're seeing in janitorial or the facilities market is, in contrast maybe with what we're seeing with overall unemployment rates across the country, right? But obviously we need to consider all factors when we're bringing this story together. So it is alarming, but at the same time, very much reassuring that there are ways to combat the challenges as long as the proper structure and programs are in place. So
that's right.
Something that Greg touched on was, supply and demand, right? That is for staffing, but obviously that's a concern that we have in supply chain as well. So I do want to hand it over to Chris to speak on the supply chain front.
Thanks, Andrea. So I am having some bandwidth issues, some connectivity issues. So I've gone off camera, so apologize for that. So you're stuck with my voice, probably best anyway. But anyway, on the supply chain front, especially for these pandemic response supplies, we've been really on just a wild ride over the past 11 months. Early on in the pandemic, we saw unprecedented demand increases in our industry, especially in things like chemicals, disinfectants, hand sanitizers, etc. These increases were anywhere between 140 and 400%. They were just really massive. And then in other supply categories such as PPE and specialty equipment, those needs and requirements soared as well. And all of this just resulted in some massive shortages and across the board. And in the case of hand sanitizers, for example, we saw a lot of substandard products being sold in the marketplace. Many of them had questionable efficacy, and in some cases, unsafe ingredients. So it was really imperative during this time that companies had large buying power, or at least strong supply chain forecasting and planning processes, coupled with large inventory stockpiles, so they could get supplies to continue operations. But I think there's good news that we're seeing over the past 5 months. Most of these markets are in a much more balanced supply and demand situation than we were seeing early on in the pandemic. But with that said, I will caution you, there is still uncertainty remaining out there, especially as we move towards reoccupying buildings and getting back into our spaces. So, if we can move to the next, but in the, as this reoccupancy occurs in this commercial office space and other areas, the demand is going to increase again, right? We're going to see PPE and chemical products in high demand, as this occupancy increases. And some of these areas, such as gloves, it's one of the areas that still remain a really challenging category for supplies. Products are available, things like gloves, they're available, but they're at just unheard of levels right now. We're seeing prices anywhere from 3 to 4x historical numbers, and we only see that increasing down the line. The other challenge that we're seeing is that there's a lot of inferior products out there in the marketplace. So making sure that they have strong inspection and quality control processes are really critical to keeping staff safe. And then finally, disinfectants and hand sanitizers. We're going to see market stresses again as the demands rise as we get back to buildings and getting increased occupancy in spaces. So, overall, it's really going to be imperative that you begin to work with your service provider to ensure that they have a really strong, robust, and well-structured supply chain in place. They have to have sufficient stocks at their manufacturers and distributors, and make sure that that product is either under their control, they own it, or it's earmarked for them. Because when we start to see this demand rise again, which will happen, we're going to see increased demand and supply imbalances, just like we saw early in the pandemic, and we do expect that there will be shortages again. So start planning now. It's never too early. Begin those discussions early, ensure that those supplies are available for you and your suppliers to be used at your facilities. So thanks, Andrea. I'll turn it back over to you, and we'll get to Stephanie and the rest of the group. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Chris. So note taken, we are going to see some tightness in the supply chain again. We may see some increase in costs, so we need to make sure that we're doing our due diligence up front related to budgeting. But one thing to keep in mind, as he mentioned, we are being bombarded with different products in the market, and people are taking this as an opportunity to fill what they see as a void, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the product is proven or safe. So make sure that that is a key consideration as we're moving back into reentry. So lastly, I want to turn it over to Stephanie to discuss, bringing, like I said, those safety procedures to life through both training and communication. So Stephanie, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. So, quality training is always important, but when it comes to people's health, training really needs to be taken seriously. You can have all the right chemicals, technology, and equipment in place, but if the janitorial staff isn't capable of using them correctly, then you lose all the benefits of those efforts. And that's why a best-in-class training program is really so essential to success. So I'd just like to share some details about what a best-in-class program looks like. First, it needs to be conducted in the trainer format that includes certification requirements. That kind of approach is really important because supervisors need to be capable of training both their existing janitorial staff and anyone that's new, whether they come on board tomorrow or 2 months from now. Your best-in-class certification program is going to have some key elements that you should look for. The first is that it's going to have a variety of training modalities, because not everyone learns the same way. So you have to have a mix of approaches like e-learning, videos, SOPs that they can read and refer back to, and live interactions that you can do via webinars. The second thing is that your testing needs to be more than just a quiz with questions to answer. There really should be a scenario-based testing where your knowledge and critical thinking skills have to be demonstrated. And most importantly, I really think that observation, live observation, makes the difference. That means that an expert sees the team member physically demonstrate their ability to do key tasks correctly. And then, your team members should not be providing services until they pass that certification. Thirdly, that certification program needs to include facilitator materials along with training on how to use them. And that's important because it ensures that the supervisors can train the janitorial staff consistently and comprehensively every single time. And then finally, that best-in-class program is going to have several mechanisms in place to confirm that every team member got trained and that the supervisors are conducting the training have that ongoing support and the latest materials. So what that means is, you should have a formal L&D department in place that's tracking all of the training completions through a learning management system. And there also needs to be a central location where the team members can access new materials, attend ongoing classes so that they can continuously upskill, and of course a way for your supervisors to contact experts if they have any questions. And then lastly, I'd like to make one final point, which is that a best-in-class training program, it goes beyond just the training. These days, visibility is paramount. So employees and customers, they want reassurance that their facility is safe to enter and that all the right steps are being taken every day. You shouldn't just see the cleaning staff, but you should be able to easily recognize that they've been trained and certified through things like specialized uniforms. And then additionally, building signage, that's also really important. And the right kind of signage, it doesn't just promote social distancing and hygiene best practices, but it also communicates to everyone that continuous steps are being taken to ensure a healthy environment for everyone.
Perfect. Thank you, Stephanie.
You're welcome.
Think we're actually going to be concluding our poll question 2 and kind of some of those answers to our poll question 2. And what I would say before I hand it back over to Tom for topic 3 is don't forget to submit your Q&A through the chat function. I'm certain that there are plenty of questions out there right now. And we do have time at the end of this webinar to do some live Q&A. So make sure that you're getting those submitted. So Tom, I'm going to turn it back over to you for topic 3.
Great, thanks Andrea and team. So let's open it up for the final poll question. Give it a second to pop up here. So when the COVID-19 pandemic is under control, will you change the safety protocols you put in place as a result of the pandemic? So we'll give it about 30 seconds here to get some answers. And just want to reiterate the comment Andrea made about Q&A. There'll definitely be time at the end, about 10 minutes to answer questions. So we can see them starting to flood in. Feel free to add. All right, let's see the results of the survey. So most are saying they're going to maintain the protocols they put in place, with the other significant response level being around doing a comprehensive assessment of the facility. Again, very consistent with what we heard in January. We're over 90%. We're in this category as well. So good to see that we have a pretty good cross-section of the Facility Executive Magazine here with us today. So now that we've discussed a range of factors, we have a lot to consider when planning for increased occupancy, and we can just flip to the next page, so that occupants feel safe coming into the office. And as more and more people come in and have a good experience and feel safe, They'll be discussing that office environment or that school environment or whatever facility type you're in charge of with their colleagues. And that's ultimately going to draw more and more people in and so on. So it's really important that those initial impressions are positive. The good news is that people really want to come back. 75% want to come back for a number of reasons, and interacting with their team members and colleagues is chief among them. The key takeaway here is 3 in 4 expect their employer to support their health and well-being. Fortunately, ABM has solutions that can contribute to the positive experience team members and other facility occupants are expecting. So from the things you touch to the air you breathe, ABM delivers healthier facilities with the latest approaches and innovations backed by experts. Enhanced Clean is geared towards disinfecting surfaces with a 3-step approach to cleaning and disinfection. Enhanced Facility is focused on disinfecting the air with a comprehensive program aimed at improving indoor air quality. When implemented together, Enhanced Clean and Enhanced Facility can help reduce viral transmission on surfaces and in the air. And as you'll see, both solutions are backed by experts. So let me explain what that means. Andrea got into this a little bit earlier. But as we were reacting to the initial outbreak last year, we decided to bring in a group of experts from the outside to help us better serve our clients. And we engaged, as Andrea said, 2 types: infectious disease and epidemiology and industrial hygiene. Our infectious disease experts are skilled in infection prevention and control, and they help us ensure that the processes we're using actually work to disinfect and kill the virus. Our industrial hygiene experts are scientists, really, and they help us keep our team members safe as they perform support and work, while also providing us with the protocols to ensure we keep our clients and their end users safe as they inhabit these spaces on a daily basis. This group has been instrumental in the evolution of Enhanced Clean and Enhanced Facility. They validated our standard operating practices and have played a major role in the development of our Enhanced Clean training and certification program that Steph just went over, as well as the Enhanced Facility proprietary risk assessment. They've also helped us separate fact from fiction with so many products and product categories coming at us. We now rely on this group to guide our thinking as we learn more about the virus, as well as other pathogens and how they spread. So let's quickly dig into Enhanced Clean and Enhanced Facility a little more on the next couple of pages. We understand how companies typically approach facility services and cleaning in general. Just increasing frequencies of disinfection will not cut it. Your building occupants and employees will demand more, and this is why we created Enhanced Clean. ABM's Enhanced Clean program is a 3-step approach that delivers healthy spaces with a certified disinfection process backed by experts. Step 1 is focused on occupants returning safely into the facility. Step 2 involves enhancing scope to include frequent high-touch disinfection of the facility during the day and at night. And step 3 addresses broad disinfection of large areas with equipment like electrostatic sprayers. The program has key differentiators like certified processes backed by experts, using hospital-grade disinfectants and specialized equipment, and we're constantly evolving with innovative solutions and technologies. And these services are delivered by trained and certified resources. We're proud of the training and certification program we built for Enhanced Clean. In partnership with Steph and the Learning and Development team and our Expert Advisory Council, we leverage ABM University. It's our learning and development platform, and we train and certify our team members at Enhanced Clean locations. We're also pursuing an accreditation for our Enhanced Clean education program from the American National Standards Institute. Most service providers don't have the resources to create a customized training and certification program, so it's really important that you talk to them about how they're training their employees. So let's switch gears real quick to Enhanced Facility. Enhanced Facility is a programmatic approach to tailor indoor air quality solutions for your facility. We use an expert-backed proprietary risk assessment tool to understand your facility's current risk rating and current indoor air quality limitations. Andrea kind of reviewed some of those risk assessment elements earlier. Our teams use the assessment outcome to generate a fact-based list of recommendations, all customized for your facility and focused on helping you form a strategy for reopening and operating more safely. Our recommendations will include expert-vetted solutions such as bipolar ionization technologies, far UV lighting solutions, filtration upgrades, and many others. One of the key components of the Enhanced Facility Program is the Healthy Building Risk Assessment. It's an 11-part diagnostic. It helps us qualify the overall risk in your facility and also identify what the biggest limitations are that are contributing to the overall risk rating. From this assessment, our teams are able to recommend customized and tailored solutions across maintenance, lighting, and HVAC systems, and our teams leverage the assessment results to prioritize the most cost-efficient and effective solutions for your space. It's not a one-size-fits-all. I think Andrea said that maybe more than once. So now that we've learned a little bit more about how we can help, let's close out the discussion with a bit of a history lesson here. So if we move on, we can see COVID-19 is not the first pandemic, nor will it be the last. And there are certainly other emerging pathogens that we need to consider as we prepare our facilities to be safer spaces for our occupants moving forward. COVID-19 has elevated awareness and sensitivity around emerging pathogens and redefined what safe means when referring to a building. As mentioned earlier, it is very likely that COVID-19 will not be eradicated in the foreseeable future, so we can add it to the list of viruses that you see here that we'll continue to manage, whether they live on surfaces or in the air. So we hope this panel discussion has offered valuable information on how to best prepare your facilities for what's next. And we have a little less than 15 minutes for Q&A. So why don't we start with, let me just survey the questions here. And I'll start with a question for Andrea. So Andrea, once we hit herd immunity, why do I need to continue with enhanced cleaning protocols?
Good question. And I think that it's very timely, especially with a lot of the, discussion related to the vaccine. And actually, I would probably point to a couple of the things that Tom had mentioned. One is what was just on the last slide is that, even once we do hit herd immunity for COVID-19, that doesn't necessarily mean that COVID-19 will be fully eradicated. It will still be out there, and that's something that we've seen in the trend, in trends with previous viruses as well. And the other thing that he had mentioned was related to the vaccine. Obviously, we're in our rollout phase right now. We're working on getting our population vaccinated, but at the same time, there are individuals who won't necessarily pursue their vaccination. So there is still a part of the population who could be at risk. The other thing that we're seeing is that we don't know at this point how long those antibodies last. So there are a lot of things that we're still wanting to make sure that we're looking out for. Information is still coming forward. We're still tracking the number of vaccinations that are taking place, the number that are not yet vaccinated or will not be vaccinated. But I think one thing that we can count on is that COVID-19 is not necessarily something that's going to be going away. It's something that's going to be here to stay. We've seen that it impacts certain parts of our population differently than others. So I think the big key in making sure that we're continuing forward with these enhanced cleaning or enhanced facilities protocols is making sure that we're doing our part and taking responsibility in making sure that we're looking out for each other.
Great, thanks, Andrea. All right, Steph, we got a bunch of questions about training.
Okay.
I guess as it relates to our program, who conducts the training for ABM staff? How often are they trained? And is there bilingual training? Because obviously we have a very significant portion of our staff, as you know, that speak Spanish.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So who does the training? So we have certified individuals in the learning and development team that conduct a variety of training sessions. So there's webinars, there's observation that occurs, and there's online conversations that occur. That's part of the train the trainer process. So what we're doing is we're directly training and certifying the supervisory staff, and then providing them with facilitator materials so that they can train and certify the on-site janitorial staff. So it's learning and development experts teaching the supervisors, certifying their ability, and then they are then teaching and certifying through direct observation the janitorial staff. How often does that happen? Well, we have, constant information comes in around COVID. So we have a lot of different mechanisms to make sure that those supervisors are always up to date, so they can then cascade the information down to their janitorial staff. And we do that through monthly office hours. We have a mechanism by which if we do learn new information, we email those supervisors directly with all the information that they need. And they also have a SharePoint site where we keep all of the training materials, and those are always kept up to date, so they've got the latest and greatest. And then I think the third part of that was, is it bilingual? Yes, it is. We offer the training both in English and in Spanish. Tom, did I get all the points of that question?
You got them all. Yeah, and there's another follow-up question, which since we're on you, we might as well put this one out there. How do you make sure that the training curriculum is updated regularly?
Yeah, so we work very closely with the advisory council, who has our hygiene experts on it. Every piece of training is produced directly from an SOP, a standard operating procedure. So our experts make decisions around what the proper protocol is. They update that standard operating procedure document. We then utilize that document directly to update the training. And as I described earlier, we then cascade that information directly to our supervisors who are already certified, and update our training materials for anyone who's new and coming through the program.
That's great. Thanks, Steph. Yeah, and I think the most recent numbers I saw was we have close to 700 facilitators trained, and we're into the thousands in terms of our certified disinfection specialists 1 and 2. So that's right. That's great. Chris, and this might be a broader context question. Do you know when gloves, and I'll just insert, and other products are supposed to be manufactured in the US? Is there some perspective you can provide there? Chris, you're on mute if you were answering. Okay. Let's keep moving. So we got the question, what does the enhanced facility diagnostic cost?
Sorry about, so thanks, Tom. So if you can hear me, okay.
All right, so let's keep moving here. What does the enhanced facility diagnostic cost? There's actually no charge for the diagnostic. It's a service that our folks provide, and if you have a local facility, ABM Facility Services branch near you, they can help. And of course, if you provide your information and the question set here, I'm sure we'll be able to get back to you with that. But that assessment up front is free of charge, and obviously it leads to other recommendations that we can help with. There was also a question about communications and how do we communicate with the building occupants as they come back in so that they know all the things that you have done. And one of the details I left out of the enhanced clean description was the facility occupants kits. So we've created signage kits that go in the buildings that do a number of things. One, you can put them on the floor, stickies on the floor that will tell you to kind of social distance 6 feet apart. They'll alert folks to make sure that they're cleaning their hands and doing that the right way when they're in the restrooms. We can attach things to the facility website, whether it's a school or a commercial office building or a manufacturing plant. Most of them now have websites set up for occupants to get information. So a lot of times we will just kind of link right into that. There's also signage that you can put up throughout the facility to make sure that they know that we have a certified program. So you can use the Enhanced Clean logo. We have a seal you can put on the front door of the building. And then there's other interesting collateral, like for example, you can put tent cards in rooms when certain rooms have been disinfected. So there's a big whole package effectively that we order for each facility, and we customize it for the facility to make sure that you have an efficient way of communicating with your facility occupants about the services that are taking place every day. Let me see, there are a couple of more questions here. What organizations do you follow regarding health and safety? Andrea, do you want to take that one? The recommendations here is the WHO, the CDC, and I know there's others.
Yeah, so I would say, and this goes back to that advisory council, we're really counting on a lot of that information coming from our third-party experts that I'd mentioned, but what they're consistently following on a daily basis is any of those recommendations coming through by world health leaders. So as Tom had just mentioned, the CDC, WHO, but one thing I would call out as well is that as we start to get into indoor air quality and kind of looking towards some of the metrics that are set for indoor air quality performance and quality, there are going to be some other certified organizations out there that we would look towards. So we would want to come into the facility, get an understanding of some of the key elements that could be driving either good or potentially poor indoor air quality and compare that against some of the recommendations from the trusted advisors that are in the industry. Any that I missed, Tom, that come to mind?
No, I think that covers it. Yeah, we are most closely aligned with the CDC for sure, since they are the governing body here in the US. And Andrea, another one for you. What do you recommend for smaller occupancy facilities? So, less than 100 or less than 50, different challenges.
Yeah, so that's interesting. And that is going to be dependent on, and I don't want to say it depends, but it is going to be dependent, again, on some of the things that I had talked about related to, what type of industry is this? Is there a large population on site today, and how are individuals situated? That would really kind of determine what we see as the overall risk in either a large or a small facility. What I would tell you is that there have been ways that we've gotten pretty creative with some of our client accounts now, and making sure that we can determine, okay, what's a way that we can ensure safety, make sure that we're combating risk, both in likelihood and severity, but then also making sure that we're maintaining to a particular budget. And what I would tell you is that this group here and some of those that I'm joined by internally as those specialists around risk and proposing the programs that are proper for your particular facility can help you come up with some of those more specific recommendations for your sites. So again, I think it does go back to some of those key questions that I had mentioned around likelihood and severity, whether it is a large or a small facility.
Great. Thanks, Andrea. All right, I think that's about all the time we have. So again, we appreciate the time and everybody hanging in there. It looks like we maintained the attendees almost the entire time we were here, which is amazing. And we'll hand it back off to you to close it out.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Tom, and thank you to all of our panelists today. Really appreciate it. And of course to ABM for sponsoring the webinar. And also thank you for our audience for attending today and participating in the Q&A. I did want to mention that we did get a good number of questions, and those will be addressed offline by the panelists, so don't feel like your question's been lost in cyberspace. We definitely appreciate the insight, and as always, I learn from these presentations as well. So a recording from today's session will be available, and key takeaways will also be provided to all attendees via email. So that's a recording and key takeaways. Look out for that in your email. And a recording will also be available on our magazine's website, facilityexecutive.com. I also want to reference the ABM websites, abmenhancedclean.com for the surface disinfection concerns, and abmenhancedfacility.com for indoor air that we've talked about today. So thanks again. Thank you, panelists. Really appreciate your time and insight. And of course, our attendees. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
Hello?